world is full of fascinating, curious, beautiful creatures that keep our planet diverse and healthy. But these species are disappearing at an alarming rate in the wild. National Geographic and photographer Joel Sartori are building an ark, photographing every species in captivity, including those at risk of extinction. And with your help, we can take action to save some of the charming, fierce, wonderful creatures, one photo at a time. See what we can save together.
Good evening, everyone. It's so great to see everyone this evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm so happy. I see so many familiar names that are signing in with us this evening. Both Princess and I have just really enjoyed over the last few weeks working with many of you during this professional development series for back to school learning, and also being in many of your schools throughout the last 3 weeks. So we want to thank you, and we're so excited to have you join us for the third installment of the back to school series, Prepare, Motivate, Inspire, equipping students to tackle real world challenges. So thank you again. I am joined today by our host for this webinar series, Miss Princess Lacewell, and I just want to thank her for just the wonderful sessions that she's been holding over the last few weeks, and I know today's is going to be just as exciting. And please remember, we have one more after today. We have one more next week, and we are joined with one of our exciting guests. It will be a National Geographic explorer. So we're hoping that you're able to tune in with us for the last session next week. As I get ready to turn it over to Princess, I just want to remind those of you who it's your first time joining us, we are on Zoom webinar, so just remember that all participants have been placed on mute upon joining the session, but we want you to engage. Please ask lots of questions. Please use the chat features, the Q&A features as well, and please engage with Princess during the session, and we will make sure that we provide you with materials at the end of the session so that you can use and take back to your classrooms as well. So thank you again. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Princess, and Princess is our engagement consultant for National Geographic Learning for the GCC team. She has been in many of your buildings. I see some familiar names, but also she joins us as a former IB coordinator, and she has worked in schools in the GCC region and in the United States. She has a wealth of knowledge and experience in curriculum design, professional development, data analysis, and the integration of English language development and academic literacy across all content areas. Please join me in welcoming our host, Ms. Princess Lacewell. Thank you. Hi, Princess. How are you today?
Hi, Davida. I am doing well. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Super excited to be here today. As you said, I've seen a lot of familiar names joining. Thank you for everyone who continues to join week after week. We really appreciate it. And welcome to those who are joining for the first time. So today's session is project-based learning to prepare students for a project-based world. And we have a few objectives for our time together today. To develop a deeper understanding of project-based learning and its impact on student outcomes, we're going to explore some strategies to implement project-based learning in classrooms. And then ultimately, the goal is for you to be able to implement one or more of these strategies to support project-based learning in your classrooms. But before we start, I have a question. And I want you to think about your students. Okay, the students that you interact with on a daily basis, How would you describe them? What are some characteristics that your students have? My colleague here will post the link in the chat to the Menti, or you can scan the QR code on your device or go to www.menti.com and type in the code there. But I want you to think about your students. How would you describe them? What are some characteristics that your students have? Just type it on the Menti. Go to the Menti now. Okay, starting to see some responses here. Let me share the Menti screen. These are really good. Excited. I love that. Inquirers. Oh, absolutely love that. Curious. Shy. I would assume that would be busy bee. Love that. Enthusiastic, creative. Very nice. Give me about 30 more seconds. Still have quite a few who haven't submitted their response. Excited to learn, easily bored. Visual, self-motivated, independent. Good. About 15 more seconds here. And I will post this word cloud on the Padlet that we will share with you at the end of the session so that you can refer back to it, see some of the things that we all said. Okay, very nice. Full of energy. Absolutely. Smart, active. Good, 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 good. And there's a reason why I asked this question. I'm going to stop sharing this, go back to the presentation now. There's a reason why I asked this question. So when we think about our students, right, they are very diverse, right? They have different interests, different ways of learning, different learning styles, different preferences, different skills, and they're at different places in their lives. But for the most part, they share some common characteristics overall. Some of the things that you said are some of the things that I highlighted as well. Active, curious, creative, risk takers, fun. And it's important for us to recognize those characteristics in our students, because we can tap into them during our lessons. So now let's think about some activities that students do not like to do in class. Okay, what are some activities that students do not like to do in class? Things like, and you can type some of your thoughts in the chat, but things like memorizing lists of vocabulary or definitions, focusing on boring grammar rules, reading about things that they're not interested in. How about being told to be quiet and stop talking to their friends? I'm sure we all maybe have had to say that to some students in the past. Be passive, right? A lot of us said they're very active, so they don't really like being passive. Never being asked their opinion, what do they know about a topic? And then being prevented from using their mobile phones or other technology during activities. And then having an activity for a very long time, things that just kind of go on for far too long, or being asked to sit while others finish an assignment. Okay, these are some things that from talking to students, from talking to teachers, students generally don't like to do in class. Now you might say, well, I have a student who loves memorizing things. There are absolutely some exceptions, but for the most part, our students do not enjoy these types of activities. Now let's compare these types of things to project work. Okay, let's think about when they're doing projects. So instead of memorizing vocabulary and rules and definitions, they could actually be using them on a project, right? Instead of being asked to be quiet. They could be working together on a project, helping each other and collaborating and speaking. Instead of being passive and just listening to what the teacher says, they can be actively communicating and producing something using technology. Instead of just receiving information, they can be analyzing and sharing things and constructing their own understanding. And instead of just sitting, they could be moving. Again, we said active. They could be moving around, getting work done, sharing their opinions and things like that, which is so important for our students. So students like activities that are meaningful, okay? Things that relate to their lives, things that they have some interest in or some understanding about. Things that are purposeful, okay? Things that are relevant, things that are enjoyable. Okay, we want to make sure that we're arousing their curiosity, sparking interests, things that lead to success, that are supported by visuals. I think somebody said that in the mentee. They are very visual. Actions, gestures, help, praise. And then they like things that are social, natural interaction, communication with others, collaboration, that sense of community. And when you think about all of those things, projects can be all of these, right? Projects can be meaningful, purposeful, enjoyable, supportive, and social. And that's what we're going to talk about during our time together today. So when you think about the philosopher Confucius, he said, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. I'm sure we've all heard that phrase at some point in time. Benjamin Franklin took that a step further and said, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. I feel like both of those go so well when we talk about projects, right? You can think about projects as experiential learning. Projects, they are knowledge in action. Learning with projects, learning with projects helps to motivate teens, right? They get to do things that they like, and they get to avoid doing the things that we listed earlier, things that they don't like, right? Again, things that we want for our students. We want them to be active. We want them to be independent. We want them to be motivated intrinsically, and projects help do that. We've been talking a lot about 21st century skills during our time together these last few weeks, covering these different topics. And projects absolutely relate to 21st century skills. They provide an opportunity for our teens to engage in those 4 C's: critical thinking. They're able to communicate their ideas, collaborate with peers, use their creativity towards something meaningful, right? Our teens are moving in a very different world from the one that their parents or their grandparents moved in. So the Partnership for 21st Century Skills identified these skills that they're all going to need to be successful in the 21st century, and projects afford opportunities for our students to use these important skills on a consistent basis to help develop these skills so that they can use them in the real world. So let's go back to the Menti, and I will change the slide here in just a second. But tell me, what comes to mind when you think of project-based learning? What comes to mind when you think of project-based learning? All right, let me just go to the Menti and change to the next slide. What comes to mind when you think of project-based learning? I'll give you a few seconds to respond, and then I will share. What comes to mind? It's the same Menti link from last time, same one. What comes to mind when you think of project-based learning? The responses are starting to come in. Let me share here. Oh, absolutely. Integrating all the subjects and skills. interaction, active learning, running through projects that students will never forget. I absolutely love that. Again, I will share these so that you can see some of the things that your colleagues mentioned. Constructivism, independent learning, students learn through experience, collaboration, absolutely, motivation, global citizenship, absolutely, we talked about that a bit last week. Teamwork, hands-on, good. Really, really great responses. Absolutely. Again, as I mentioned, I will share these results on the Padlet so that you can see some of the things that your colleagues said. All right, skip that. So I asked myself the same question, right? What comes to mind when you think of project-based learning? So project-based learning, it's an instructional approach, right? Students learn by actively engaging in real-world projects and tasks instead of traditional classroom lectures. It encourages students to explore and to solve problems, to work collaboratively, and apply what they've learned in a practical context. So when I think of project-based learning, I think of things like engagement. I think someone mentioned that in the Menti. But students choose or are given a project that interests them. Okay, it makes learning more engaging and more motivating. I think of real world relevance. I think these projects are designed to reflect real world challenges, and it helps students to see their application of learning. How is what they're learning in school, how does that apply to the real world? I think of inquiry, right? Project-based learning encourages students to ask questions, to research, to seek solutions, and it fosters that critical thinking skills. It fosters problem-solving skills, which are so important in today's world and for their future. I think of collaboration, which I think I saw a lot in that Menti. Students often work in teams during project-based learning, so it promotes teamwork and communication skills. Think of ownership. I think I saw the word kind of independent a lot there. Students have ownership over their projects, which can increase their sense of responsibility and autonomy in their learning. And I don't know if I saw this one, I also think of assessment. Because assessment in project-based learning, it really focuses on the process and the final product. So it often involves rubrics that measure various skills and the knowledge gained. So overall, project-based learning aims to make learning more active, to make it more student-centered, and really prepares learners to tackle complex challenges that they may encounter in the real world. So let's think about the real world a little bit more, right? We all live in the real world. I want you to think about, because we talked about project-based learning for a project-based world, right? So I want you to consider the projects that you take on in the real world, in your everyday lives. What skills do you think these projects require? We're going to do a waterfall chat for this one. We're not going to go back to the Menti. So what I want you to do, if you're new to this webinar series, we've been doing water chats the past few weeks. But what a waterfall chat is you're going to type your response to the question in the chat without hitting enter. Okay. I will say the word this week will be PBL. When I say that word, everybody will hit enter at the same time, and you'll see the responses cascade in the chat like a waterfall. So I want you to, in the chat, type in your response. Again, do not hit enter. I will say the word. This week it's going to be PBL. Hit enter, and we'll see our responses cascading in the chat like a waterfall. So take about a minute or so and tell me the project that you take on in your day-to-day life, in your work environment, what skills do these projects require? Again, we are typing our responses in the chat without hitting enter. Give you about 30 more seconds or so. When I say the word, we will hit enter at the same time. I haven't said it yet, so just hold off. Type your response in the chat without hitting enter. About 15 more seconds. All right, PBL. Okay, very nice. I'm seeing all of those responses in the chat. What skills do these require? Again, these are the projects that you're doing on a day-to-day basis in the real world, in your personal life, in your career. They require things like communication, thinking skills, things we've already mentioned, self-management, research skills. Feel free to scroll up and look at some of the responses of the other participants today. Innovation, planning, I'm seeing communication a lot, organizational skills, creativity, brainstorming, time management, collaboration, critical thinking, cooperation, leadership. Okay, I feel like we can see a bit of a theme here when it comes to the responses that we have posted, right? Projects in the real world often require things like collaboration, problem solving, time management, the things that we're saying, resource allocation, all of these skills that project-based learning also aims to develop in students, okay? So that's why it is so important for us to use this type of learning in schools, because it really aligns to the way that the real world is structured and executed. And it prepares them for the challenges that they will encounter in their future careers and in their personal lives. I can probably sum up what I do as a series of projects, right, that I will prioritize from, most to least important. And then oftentimes when people talk about their accomplishments, it's oftentimes the project that they completed and how those projects went. So projects is something that our students will absolutely encounter in their future, in the real world. So it helps us as educators to develop these skills in students so that they are prepared. All right, so let's talk about some of the benefits to students when it comes to project-based learning. And it highlights a lot of the things that we've been talking about. Active engagement. So project-based learning really encourages active participation. It makes learning more enjoyable and memorable. I think somebody said projects they'll never forget. Absolutely. More memorable for students when they work on these real world projects that actually interest them. Okay, that's important. And once we kind of get into some strategies, we'll talk about that more. Critical thinking, which we talked about in the first session. Students develop critical thinking and problem solving skills as they identify and address complex issues within their projects. Additionally, practical application. Project-based learning, it helps students see the practical relevance of what they learn. That is so important because it helps lead to a deeper understanding of the concepts and how to apply them in the real world. Collaboration, working on projects in teams fosters that collaboration and communication, which are essential in many aspects of life and in work. Ownership and autonomy. Students have ownership over their projects. It really allows them to take responsibility for their learning and make decisions about how to approach tasks. We often say we want our students to be independent learners. This really helps with that. Cannot forget creativity. I think that came up when we were talking about characteristics of our students. But project-based learning really encourages creativity. As students, they find innovative solutions to problems and they design unique project outcomes. I think somebody mentioned this one here, interdisciplinary learning. Projects often involve multiple subjects, so it promotes interdisciplinary learning and it helps students see connections between different areas of knowledge. It also promotes long-term knowledge, retention. Learning through projects, it just leads to a better retention of knowledge because students apply what they learn in a meaningful context. It prepares them for the real world. Project-based learning prepares students for real-world challenges where they will often need to work collaboratively, they'll need to think critically, and they'll need to solve complex problems. And then that intrinsic motivation, the sense of achievement and accomplishment from completing a project can really boost students' intrinsic motivation to learn. Just so important. So overall, project-based learning, it really offers a holistic educational experience that not only enhances academic skills, but it also equips students with valuable life skills that are essential for success in the 21st century. So I want to hear from you a little bit more and tell me, when it comes to project-based learning and your implementation, what are some of your current successes? What are some things that you're doing that you feel have gone well? What are your current successes with project-based learning? We're going to do this as another waterfall chat. So again, you're going to type your responses in the chat without hitting enter. When I say the word PBL, everybody will hit enter at the same time, and the responses will cascade in the chat like a waterfall. Take about a minute or two and tell me, what are your current successes when it comes to project-based learning? And if you haven't started, it's okay to say that too. But if you have tried a few things, or maybe you've had some projects that have gone really well in the past, feel free to share. Again, we are typing our responses in the chat without hitting enter. When I say the word PBL, everybody will hit enter at the same time, and the results will cascade in the chat like a waterfall. Take about another 30 seconds or so. All right, PBL. Love it. Seeing those responses come through. Confident, working in teams. Working on integration. Students are enjoying working together. Okay, pre and post assessments, pairs, STEAM lessons, absolutely, grabbing their attention. Very nice. Presentations. Students who are usually quiet tend to collaborate more, absolutely. Sharing prior knowledge, sparking creativity and inquiry, relationship building, absolutely. These are all wonderful. Okay, thank you for that. So now I'm just going to go through just some quick tips and things that you could potentially do in your classroom for project-based learning. Now, I'd like to highlight, this is an hour-long session. I cannot possibly go over everything there is to know about project-based learning, but I'll give you an overview. And as always, if you want to discuss anything further, feel free to reach out and we can absolutely go in more depth. So let's get into it. One of the first things that I want to highlight is choosing a relevant topic, right? So choose a topic or theme that aligns with the curriculum and is relevant and interesting to students. I cannot stress that enough. I think somebody posted when they talked about characteristics of their students, it was easily bored. Absolutely, right? And especially if they're constantly having to do things that aren't interesting to them. Now, every so often, of course, you're not going to be interested in every single thing, but if we as educators can try to choose topics that we know that are interesting to our students, maybe doing things like interest surveys so we have an idea of their interests, that truly goes a long way. So here's an example from a unit on technology. A lot of students are interested in technology. In this activity, they would be writing an essay about whether technology is good or bad for bringing people together, and then doing a presentation about it, right? So they will be doing research about different types of technology, how it all works, and how it contributes to community, right? If you look at this quote here, we now expect more from technology and less from each other, which is a great kind of provocation for this task. Okay, so again, choosing things that are interesting to students. I think somebody mentioned STEAM and STEM. Absolutely. Okay, so this is a project that they could do about toys on Earth and in space. So they could potentially design some toys that could be used in space. Again, students are probably interested in space, especially with what's going on in the Middle East when it comes to space exploration. And then a lot of our students are going to be interested in toys. So again, relevant, interesting topics for our students. Another thing I want to stress is clear learning objectives. Okay, so beginning with well-defined learning objectives to ensure that students understand what they are expected to learn and achieve throughout the project, and then identifying specific learning goals and outcomes that students should achieve through the project. So having a plan for students. Something that's also really nice when you're doing projects is having an exemplar for them to kind of see what the ultimate expectation is, right? If they're building something, like have them see an example. If they're writing something or doing a presentation, maybe have them look at a good example of a presentation. So it's clear what they are expected to do, and that step-by-step guidance will go a very, very long way. Okay, so here's just an example of step-by-step instructions, an exemplar that students could look at as a model. Okay, so in this task, students would be making an invention that they believe would help people. Okay, so it's step-by-step instructions for what it should do, and then they're going to give a demonstration about this invention, and you can see a model here of kind of the background, how they came to make this invention, the research they did to figure out what would work and what would not work. Again, step-by-step guidance, maybe an exemplar is very helpful for students. And this one, I think, is probably the one that stands out most to me. Authentic problems, choosing authentic problems. So something that is related to the real world, something that is authentic or a real world challenge or problem that really resonates with students and that is connected to the curriculum. We spent an hour last week talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. That is a great place to start when it comes to choosing authentic problems. You can take so many things from just looking at the SDGs. So I've been talking about clean water a lot. I'll stay on brand. So here's an example of a clean water unit where students would work together to create a slideshow about a solution for clean water. So again, they will be doing research about the problem, kind of looking at what's been done in the past, and they would work in groups, as we talked about, to give this presentation. And then I feel like this goes without without saying. I feel like this came up a lot, cooperation, collaboration, when we were putting things in Menti and in the waterfall chat. I'm sorry, I don't know why those are, I'll have to change that, but it should be things like collaboration, teaching students to work together, assigning roles, communicating effectively within their groups, depending on the project's complexity, organizing students into teams to promote collaboration, all go so far. Again, that collaboration is such an important skill in today's workforce. So putting students in groups is a great way to promote project-based learning. And then choice and autonomy, options, and flexibility. So allowing students some degree of choice in selecting project topics or approaches, fostering ownership and motivation, and exploring different types of projects is important. So giving them different things to do. So whether it's research papers, presentations, creating prototypes, community service projects, to all of those things help to suit different learning styles and different preferences. So having that flexibility and giving them different types of projects goes a long way. And I'll put a list of projects on the Padlet for you to kind of look at and maybe pull some ideas and some inspiration from. This is also a great way to incorporate technology into the project, right? So some students may want to use technology to present their projects, others may not. But again, that choice really, really goes a long way. And it facilitates things like research, communication, and the presentation of their findings. Some examples of giving students choices. So you have different types of activities: photo gallery, multimedia presentation, feature article, all connected to the same kind of topic, but different ways to present their information. Okay, we got another example where students are building an empire after they've learned about the Roman Empire and its legacy. Options of how to present this: multimedia presentation, an introduction to a travel guide, using a map. Okay, so again, that choice goes such a long way for students, and it helps us as educators really get the best out of our students, because sometimes, depending on how students present their information, we might be assessing something completely different, right? We all teach English language learners, and if they don't have the language ability, sometimes writing that feature article may be a lot more difficult than doing, say, a presentation. So giving them that choice really can help us as educators assess true understanding and not language or something else. And then assessment, clear rubrics, clear criteria. So establish clear assessment criteria and rubrics to evaluate students. This really ensures transparency, and it helps to ensure that students know what they're being assessed on. Also, it's really nice to include not only just the content knowledge, but also skills. Things like problem-solving skills, teamwork, presentation quality can all be a part of the rubric. Because again, those are the skills that are important. So we need both. We need the content knowledge, and we also need the skills. Assessing both in the rubric goes a long way, and it really helps students to develop those skills when they know how they are going to be assessed. They know what things they need to do, what things they need to include in their projects. So here's just some examples of some rubrics. Again, depending on your school situation, some of you may have to use specific types of rubrics, but these are just some examples. If you look at the rubric on the bottom, I think this is a math project. I can't remember. No, I'm sorry. This is a science project at the bottom. And it has things like students worked collaboratively with group members to build and test the roller coaster. Again, including not only the content, but the skills, because they're all important. And then reflection, okay? Incorporating regular opportunities for students to reflect on their learning process, on the challenges, the insights gained throughout the project, encouraging students to reflect on what they've learned, so important. And it really fosters a culture, it really fosters a culture of continuous improvement, okay? Because at the end of a project, we can have students go back and reflect on what they did, what went well, what didn't, and make adjustments for the future. So what kind of changes would they make to apply those same skills in a future project or in a future real life situation, okay? Again, we want that environment of continuous improvement. How can we be better? Reflection really, really helps. Okay, so here's just some example of some simple reflection questions that could be done at the end of a project. And of course, celebrate and showcase. So acknowledge the hard work, celebrate the accomplishments and the completion of the project, right? Acknowledge their creativity. Have students present their findings, their projects to the class or to the wider community. Okay, it's a great way to celebrate the completion of the project and a great way to get the community involved. Okay, oftentimes our parents love to see stuff like this and other community members, you know, putting displays up around the school so students can see their work on display is a great way to motivate students as well. Okay, so we talked about a lot of different ways to kind of implement project-based learning, some ways to kind of help us with project-based learning. But I want us to think about us as teachers, as educators. What's our role in all of this? Okay, so let's do another waterfall chat. And I want you to think about teachers. What is the teacher's role in all of this? When it comes to effective implementation of project-based learning, what is your role as an educator? Again, we're going to do a waterfall chat. So you're going to type your response in the chat without hitting enter. When I say PBL, everyone will hit enter at the same time, so the responses cascade in the chat like a waterfall. So go ahead and take about a minute or two to tell me what you think the teacher's role is in all of this. What is the teacher's role in all of this? Again, we are typing our responses in the chat without hitting enter. I will say PBL, and we will all hit enter at the same time, so the responses cascade in the chat like a waterfall. Take about 30 more seconds. What is the teacher's role? All right, PBL. Okay. Facilitator. Conduct learning process by guiding students, guidance. I'm seeing a lot of facilitator guidance. Absolutely. Collaborating with students, allowing inquiry to happen. Absolutely. Guide, motivate, help. Moderator. Follow up, giving hints, redirecting, encouraging. Absolutely. facilitating discussion. So I think we have a clear theme here. Facilitator, guide, absolutely. These are all great. So when I was kind of thinking about this, putting this together, I had exactly the same thoughts: to monitor, to facilitate, which we saw multiple times, to make sure students understand, to help with language when needed. As Avita mentioned, I am really big on language development, and we teach a lot of English language learners in this region. So that's always important to me. To provide resources, access to information. Oftentimes, if you have limited time to do a project and it involves research, maybe you give them some of the research instead of spending that time having students do all of the research and things like that. And then providing time for students to share their final product or presentation. Just a little note here: when students make language mistakes, it's important to note them and deal with them later and not necessarily interrupt them. So I say that because, again, language is super important to me. And if you're doing projects and you're monitoring, you're kind of circulating it and listening in, you might pick up on some things. And now those are great things to use in future mini lessons to help with language, because we cannot forget about language in everything that we do. Whether you're a math teacher, a science teacher, it's important for you to be picking up on those things as well. And maybe you can work with English teachers to kind of help address specific deficits when it comes to language, because again, we do have English language learners. But again, I think the theme is clear: monitoring, facilitating the process. That is our major role as educators. Okay, thank you so much. I will open it up for questions here. Anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A, or you can type them in the chat.
Hi, Princess. I had a few questions in the Q&A. One was about providing some of the resources or templates or some examples of the projects that we shared. And I can answer this. Certainly, we will be able to do that. Ask specifically about some of the STEM projects. So we will definitely upload those to the Padlet so that you can have access to use those with your students. So that was one of the questions that came up.
Yes, I will share the Padlet here shortly. There's already some things on there, and I will actually be adding some more, and I will add the presentation as well, so you can kind of see the things that I posted. And I can add some of the specific STEM and STEAM projects as well. So those will be added. Give me a day or so, because I actually have to catch a flight later this evening, but I will have them uploaded shortly. Any other questions? Oh, and you know what? The question always comes up, so I'll answer it now. Certificates, absolutely. Your certificates will be emailed to you after the session. It is based on the Zoom attendance. So if you registered and use that same link to be here, you will receive a certificate in about a week or so. We'll have the certificates out. Phonics projects for elementary learners. We absolutely have some projects.
Oh, you saw it.
Yes, we absolutely have projects for elementary learners. Is it phonics based? I'll have to check if they're based on phonics or if they're just based on skills. But we do have projects for very young learners. I'll post some examples on the chat. Thank you. I want to see if any other questions have come up. Kindergarten students, hands-on, can you help them? Is there anything we can do to help them as their English is their second language? Yeah, so as I mentioned, language always has to be there. So things like, and I didn't mention it in this session, I've mentioned it in previous sessions, but things like language frames to help them with language, paragraph frames or sentence starters and things like that to help them if they are writing, things like that to help them with the language. And then those mini lessons are so impactful. So as you're kind of watching them do these projects and you're listening and you're noticing things, those mini lessons can go a long way. If you notice, oh, you know what, there's a problem with subject-verb agreement, in comes a mini lesson on subject-verb agreement to really, really focus on that. That really helps.
Princess, I'm actually going to take the next one. It's a question for students of determination. Is it better to put them in groups to reinforce communication and collaboration, or would it be better if the teacher's a partner, or as sometimes SOD students are left out by the classmates? I love this question. My original background is in special education, and I'm a firm believer in inclusion and flexible grouping, especially when you're doing project-based learning. It's an opportunity for students of determination to be able to see some of those higher order thinking skills that maybe some of their other classmates have. It's a time that they can communicate and collaborate and build on those skills. And especially when you can still differentiate to their level, maybe assign tasks and jobs so that those students of determination are able to participate in the projects, but at their level. And so a great way to do that is to assign a task or jobs to all members, but a way for all students to feel that they are a part of the learning experience. So great question.
Absolutely. And I will upload some examples of roles that you can assign on the Padlet as well. Very nice. Any other questions?
And I've just added the Padlet link to the chat.
Perfect. So again, the Padlet, I think, as Davina said, she just posted it. Here's the QR code, the link. As mentioned, there is some stuff already on there, but I will be adding stuff over the next couple of days based on the questions that we received. So please bookmark the link, come back to it. And there also is a space on the Padlet for Q&A. So if there's something that comes up later that you didn't think to ask now, feel free to post it on the Padlet. We'll get an alert and we will absolutely go back and answer your questions as well. So again, bookmark that link, come back to it. We will add more and more resources based on the questions that we receive. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. And I think that's all. Any other questions, Davida? Is that it?
That's it so far. Any other CPDs that we can send regarding any of our professional developments and information that we have? So definitely we will be sharing out other PDs that we'll be doing throughout the academic year. We'll share that with you. And if you have topics, please send them to us so that we can change the topics that we offer throughout the academic year.
Thank you. And Davida, if you can post the survey link in the chat.
Sure.
In the survey, there's a question about what other topics would you like. So please tell us the topics that you like, and we will absolutely add them to potentially some future sessions. We do have one more session in this current series. So we just finished up project-based learning, and our final session will be empowering change agents for a better tomorrow. We will have a special guest. So it's going to be a great time. And I stress this a lot, but we always say we want our students to be change agents, but how do we go about ensuring that that actually happens? So that's what we'll be talking about in the next session. So please come back and join us. We'd love to have you. And I will leave you with my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have additional questions, you want to discuss further, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to further engage. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Truly, truly appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Princess. Thank you for another great session. And everyone, thank you just for the participation and engaging with us tonight. And we hope to see you next week.
Bye. Thank you.